Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts, Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in the space. This week, it's episode 1 of season 3. We're going to have a chat around Azure multi-factor authentication, a core security feature for securing your identities in Azure Active Directory. Hey, Alan, how are you doing?
Hey Sam, I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, no, not too bad. It's been a while since we recorded last. A planned break this time, but we've had the holiday season in between. How was your? What did you do with your time off from the podcast?
Mainly just relaxing. Had some time off work, and obviously had the holidays, so spend time with the kids and stuff. So and family. What about you?
Good. Yeah, I just very much the same. And I think it's been good to take a reset and just to stand back and think about what sort of content we want to cover with the podcast and going forward. Alan, do you want to explain around what our plans are for season 3, episode counts and things like that?
Yes, sure. So we've kind of thought about doing 21 episodes, I think it is. Kind of similar to the last season, season two. Um, we're planning to do every week again, every Friday at 7 a.m. UK time or UTC, yeah, UK time. Um, so yeah, we're going to start with that, and we've got loads of topics kind of lined up already or planned, with the option for them to move around depending on what new stuff comes out or what topics hot at the time of us podcasting. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Yeah, and it has been kind of strange not having the weekly upload schedule to keep us on track, if that makes sense. I felt a bit lost at some points, less pressure sometimes, but no, yeah, it's good to be back podcasting and talking, and we can see from the listens and support that we've had even since we haven't been uploading. Our stats have dropped down, but we can still see that lots of people are listening still and giving us great feedback. So that has been a massive positive boost for us, because that really shows that you know um, even if we're not posting, people are still being engaged by the content. So as for as long as you're all listening, we'll continue to create content for you. Okay. So this week is Azure multi-factor authentication. I'm going to sort of run with it, with Alan asking me questions around it. Alan has many years of experience with deploying MFA solutions, so his knowledge is also going to be really valuable. So I assume I'll have to tag in him for some of the parts of the conversation, but we'll see how we go.
Yep. Okay. So let's start our questions then. So at a high level and sort of an overview, what is multi-factor authentication, MFA, and why is it important to sort of today's world?
Okay, so if people aren't aware around multi-factor, and I would say multi-factor in multiple different scenarios of people's lives is quite ubiquitous, um, in 2023. It's effectively a second challenge of an item of knowledge that you can request from a user to ensure that they are currently the correct user that's attempting to log into a system. I've butchered that explanation a little bit, but I'll take you through an actual scenario. So, for instance, if you imagine traditionally, you might just have, say, a username and a password for to get access into a system. Um, let's say your password was compromised, then anybody with your password would then be able to log in as you. So MFA introduces challenges, on top of that. So effectively, what they're looking for is something extra on top of on top of your password. So something that you have or something that you are. So something that you have might be like a trusted device, like a phone or some sort of hardware key that you may be given, or something that you potentially are, like biometrics, like a fingerprint or some sort of face scan. And what that's going to do is that's going to have a second challenge against that login attempt, which is going to give an extra layer of protection. Um, and talking about how effective that is, I think it's good to understand how sometimes weak the password mechanism really can be. We have users reusing their passwords, recycling their passwords on multiple websites and applications. That's password fatigue. People have many different passwords in their personal and in their corporate lives. So the chances of them reusing their passwords or making very similar passwords is reasonable for a human, right? Unless they're using, say, something like a password manager. So what then invariably can happen is your password could get leaked, it could get dumped, and then once your password and username and password combination is known, then adversaries can attempt to log into to your accounts with those details. So what's multi-factor authentication does is it adds you can't just have your password anymore. You also have to have either something that you have or something that you are, which usually comes through something that you have. So that might be an SMS notification to your phone. You might have an authenticator app installed, and it will send you a notification that you've got to click on, or it will ask for a code from you in order to log in. Is it effective? Um, in my experience and in terms of best practice, it's highly effective in terms of protecting against abused and misused accounts. Alan, have you seen that in practice as well? How effective MFA can be.
Yeah, I think 3 years ago. In fact, it was the last in-person Ignite, so 2019. The stance from Microsoft's view of it was um, enabling MFA stops 99.9% of password cracking attempts against Azure because it's okay someone having the password, but then they can't get any further
Yeah, yeah,
at that point.
exactly. Yeah, you need that. You've got that real time challenge there, haven't you? Which is very hard to then manipulate. It still can be manipulated, usually through social engineering more than anything. But in order to get access to those accounts is a lot more complex. Um, I think it's worth just quickly talking about specifically. So there's many different MFA solutions products that are tied to many different vendors. So we're obviously going to just talk about um, Azure Azure MFA, um, Azure AD MFA, I should say. Um, so what I'll talk about is I'll just talk about some of the available verification mechanisms that are available in Azure AD MFA. So you've got the Microsoft Authenticator app. You may already have that application on your phone, and effectively, that first party app is going to give you a really good user experience because you can do like things like notifications and really make that user experience more streamlined. Windows Hello. So in terms of biometric access or PIN access in as well through that's usually a corporate or enrolled device. Is that correct, Alan, for Windows Hello?
It, it is, but I guess from a personal perspective, if you've got a device with your personal Microsoft account, you can still enable Windows Hello
Yeah,
to
that's
log
true.
on. So
Yeah, definitely in the personal space as well. Yeah, great shout. FIDO2 security keys. FIDO2 is a much newer security key sort of standard. There's many different vendors that create those keys. So you can also use FIDO2 as that as well. Um, there are other hardware tokens and software tokens that are supported as well. You've then got SMS, so you can get an SMS or a text message to your phone. So that's always great as a backup as well, and voice call as well. So you can have a voice call sent to you with a code to replay. Um, and I think it's also just worth mentioning that it is possible to have multiple verification methods. So you could have the Microsoft Authenticator app, and then you could have SMS enabled as well. And what that would then mean is if you let's say that you lost your phone and you had to order a new SIM card and a new phone, you could then use the voice, the SMS once you've got access to your new device to then get that through. And that's also a good backup for any physical security keys that you may have as well. Um, so uh, I think that's probably it as a high level. Alan, is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of just high level for MFA and um,
The only thing I would say in sort of the real world scenarios, things like that, if we take a step back from corporate location, corporate sort of environments, things like that. Um, it, from a view to a users, you may feel like it's a new thing that they've got to try and do now. So there is some resistance because extra things they got to do. But I guess in today's world, you've got to think about, especially in the UK. I don't know about other locations that even when we're doing a payment now online, beforehand you
yeah,
just typed in your stuff, your details, your card number, everything, click submit, bang, you're paid. Um, Now you have to do a verification, and that might be a call, a text, or it might be the banking app bringing a push notification saying, "Hey, you're spending
yeah,
£10 with Amazon or whoever, and this is you," sort of thing. So
yeah,
it's coming into people's lives. It may be that some of the users don't realize that it is multi-factor. I mean, I'm sure that I'm thinking of quite a few places now say, right, okay, now we need to verify your phone number. We're going to send you a code when you do a password reset, things like that. That's multi-factor.
yeah.
You just don't sort of realize it in some sense.
Yeah, and I think would you now say that it's more likely now that because of these other like more personal, let's say these personal, um, these personal systems that you might use, like say your personal bank account, because they are now using these types of technologies to to challenge users in their day to day lives, that it's becoming easier in a corporate setting for people to understand and adopt MFA because they're using it everywhere. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember sort of 6, 7 years ago when you had the one-time hardware tokens to log into your remote access
Yeah,
where I used to work, sort of thing. It was, it was great. It was a pain in the backside because it was difficult. There was nothing on your phones or anything. You had to have this device. Can you remember? I don't know if you ever had it, Sam, but on World of Warcraft, when you got the one-time password code, make sure your account didn't get
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
hijacked.
yeah,
You know, and
yeah,
then I mean that was very brutal because if you lost it, you had to go through loads of hoops to get your account back.
yeah,
Not that I've
exactly.
ever been through that, but it's
Yeah,
been around for some time, but it's been a pain in the backside. It's been there has been a lot of resistance, but because of like today's the cyber risk out there, what's happening, everyone's adopting it now. So I think adopting it within the organization, I think most people would feel like they would already should be doing it,
yeah,
kind of thing. If people get on board, it's a
yeah,
known thing now. And the other thing I was going to just quickly talk about was like with Microsoft, you can also potentially start to remove that password on
yeah,
the logins with some of these technologies like FIDO2 keys and the Authenticator app, where the user signs in and then it goes right. let's do an MFA prompt. I'm going to ask you, this number to type in, kind of thing, and then that signs you in. So actually, your password can't never be used
Yeah,
as
should we
well.
just
So
let's should we just have a quick talk about passwordless? Because I know because it is still multi-factor, right? And I think it's a newer sort of shift into different thinking around, effectively just removing the password, right? Because that real-time challenge is so effective, right? That it should actually be prioritized, over a password, right? So uh, are you seeing resistance to that change? Because I know that you're a big fan of passwordless
well,
sign in, but are
well,
you seeing challenge? Is that the new thing to overcome?
well, the fact is, I don't actually know my corporate password anymore because I don't actually type it in.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have to actually reset it every time I actually need it. That's the crazy thing with my work mode. I Windows Hello into my corporate device. I single sign into everything,
Yeah.
um, and when I do need to sign in, I get a passwordless thing. So uh, yeah, we do see some resistance to it because it's an unknown, and yeah, unless you're sort of moving to password technologies for your day to day, like your laptop, using Windows Hello, and to sign into other applications, then it's going to be difficult, especially when you're sort of on premise, where you may not have single sign into those on premise applications, or even into SaaS applications that can't do SAML.
Yeah.
You know, it might be that it can, it's replicating your password into there, or it comes back to your Active Directory to do that sign in. Um, but yeah, so there is resistance because of technology, maybe not necessarily around um, resistance to moving to it. It's more around the other, the legacy things that might be holding it back to go full passwordless and maybe not having two experiences.
Yeah. 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 And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I've seen challenges where, you know, um, um, if you have if you let's say you have two corporate passwords, right? Let's say you had a corporate password for your laptop and then something else for some sort of or even multiple for different online systems and things like that. I see real user experience challenges there where users are generally required to remember multiple passwords and then to rotate those passwords all at their own different frequencies, right? And keep track of that as well. And that is where weak password usage really comes in at that point. And then it's really interesting that you say and I get this as well because I'm not fully passwordless, but from your perspective, you know, um, then having to you go fully, you've got this fully password experience, but then when you do require it, you have to reset your password every single time because you can't remember it, and all of these different things. So it's definitely like a weird because I think we've got Windows Hello on a lot of devices now, because even forget about biometrics, just a pin on a device. Yeah, right. Like let's say you log into your laptop with a 6-digit pin or a 6-digit passcode. Um, it can be a long time, right? Between utilizing those passwords if you're thing. So it's an interesting challenge. Um, and I posed the original question to you about friction is because I can still talk to people around you know talking to them about best practice in terms of never allowing passwords to expire. And sometimes it's like, oh, well, I don't, I'm not really ready for that yet. So I feel like taking the password away is like potentially one bridge too far, isn't it? Right? And so yeah, it's just interesting to get your take on that.
I mean, it's bearing in mind, resetting a password, I can do it myself using the self-service password reset. So it's not, there's no extra capability that the business has to take on.
Yeah,
I don't have to call the help desk to get it reset and everything. I can do it
yeah,
myself.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Well, just write on a post-it note and stick it to your monitor, Alan. That's
uh,
the right. You wouldn't have to worry
yeah,
about it. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. Okay. So going on, how do we set up this MFA? How do we set up Azure AD multi-factor authentication? Is it easy?
I would from my experience, there's the Azure Active Directory has got such a simplistic configuration process for MFA. I would say it is, from a technology perspective, I'm going to label it as, air quotes, easy, right? Especially, if you go super basic, enable security defaults, and just have MFA like on, right? That I think that's the simplest, onboarding, journey for the organization, right? Um, but then we do have, and we'll talk about security defaults and other technologies such as conditional access in a bit more depth later on. Um, but if you want to have granular, I think the complexity then comes in. I don't know if complexity is the right word. You might have a better word for it, Alan. But the complexity then can creep in when you're trying to understand, trying to layer in more complex policies that can, for instance, like you might have a policy which says people don't need to MFA if they're on, at a corporate location or, in the office and different things like that. When you start to get to, and we'll talk about that in a bit more depth, but it's when you get to those types of, um, integrations, that's when it starts to become more complex. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, definitely. That it's easy to set up. It's then um, it, securing certain areas in different ways, like you said, but also um, choosing when someone gets prompted to improve the user experience of being prompted, because you don't want it to be MFA fatigue where possible.
Yeah.
Some areas of your business may require it all the time, and that makes absolute sense. But there are times when you're thinking, well, actually, we trust the device, we trust the location, and things like that. The device isn't risky if you've got other technologies giving you those signals. It's compliant. Um, so why do I need to do an MFA prompt sort of thing? So
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
okay, so how easy is it then? So setting it up in Azure AD, it's relatively easy. How easy is it for the user to set up then? Is it they have to contact the help desk to get it all set up, get a QR code or something to set it up?
Okay, so from an initiating the onboarding process, the organization can trigger that from their side. They could put a policy in place to, require people to enroll for MFA, and let's say when you access some sort of application, you would then be prompted to register for MFA. Um, I, I'm gonna I'm gonna say that it's a bit of a cop out, but I'm gonna say it depends in terms of user complexity on onboarding, right? Because you know there are a variety of different users that are out there, and their skill level with technology is varied, and that is okay because that is not part of their that is not expected of them. So I would say that you do definitely need to have in the back of your mind that you may need to help users through that process. Um, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more in depth in the when we talk about like what user data is stored and things like that. Um, but especially when maybe some of your users don't have mobile phones or corporate devices and different things like that. So there may be times where you have to have, different onboarding strategies for different types of people. You might have to say, ask everybody to register for MFA, and if they're happy with putting it on their personal device and adding Microsoft Authenticator and using that. Um, but other people may require you to provide a hardware key to so that they can actually use it. So the onboarding process, I mean, downloading the application, and the I think Microsoft have done a good job with the onboarding screens, telling people what they need to do in what step. I mean, users might just click next, 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 which can sometimes be a bit challenging. But especially because we have different types of Microsoft accounts, right? That can go into Authenticator, and also third-party accounts that can go in there as well. So, um, but generally, it is self-serve. There is a set of screens that you go through, and then Microsoft will then challenge you to test that it's actually working correctly. And then at that point, they'll tell you, "Yep, you're all good," and then move on. And then it can also then prompt you for, say, a second um, challenge. So you might say, I would like users to have um, I would like users to have, the Authenticator app as their primary, and then as their secondary, I would like them to do an SMS, so that they can always get into their account themselves, right? Because if they don't have if they just do the Microsoft Authenticator app, if they lose their device, then they've got to come back to you to get you to re-register, right? At that point, so but there's there's different ways to approach that situation. Some other people might be like, well, we'll get you registered for MFA, and then if you lose your device or whatever, then you're going to have to contact help desk to get yourself reset, like as a you know a security mechanism inside of that. Um, what would you say about onboarding, Alan? Any challenges that you've had around that?
Uh, it's generally around the user adoption, and like you said, it's the personal device the use of your own device. Because there can be, like you said, challenges that people may not have mobile phones. It might be that they do have a mobile phone, but it's not smart.
That's true. Yeah.
I've seen that still today, that some people don't want an Android and iOS device. They want just a phone, and that's absolutely fine. So there's challenges to that. But then I've seen in some organizations that actually, with the deals they can get and things like that, that getting a cheap smartphone is probably cheaper than buying a hardware token
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
sometimes.
Yep, definitely.
Sometimes. And then there's a corporate number then to access, to contact that person
Yeah.
as well. So there's some scenarios around that, and it is relatively simple. I feel as well. I think Microsoft done a good job. Microsoft has a load of campaign documentation that you can pass out to your users to get them geared up for it and things like that. Um, Users can register before MFA is enabled as well, so you don't have to be on the day, 0 day. Everyone has to sign up and everyone's locked out. There are reports as well that tell you who has signed up and who hasn't, so you can see where you are on that journey. Um, and I guess the only complexities might be if you're starting to use things like the FIDO2 keys, things like that, because it is a little bit different. It's not too difficult, but there's extra steps there, and it's probably the same for the hardware tokens, things like that. Um, but yeah, the one main thing I would say as well is that it really the organization can't set it up for the user. It is purely self service. You have to sign in to actually do it. So
Yep.
there is some, I think, in the past, I don't know if it's still there now, you could sort of provide some, like, the numbers, maybe some email addresses from the API kind of thing, to sort of pre-populate some things. So if they've got a corporate number, then you can sort of pre-populate some of it. I think, I don't know if that's still there now, because I think most people use the Microsoft Authenticator app now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah, no. And so onboarding, we're going to say easy to moderate complexity,
yeah,
right? And orchestrating that sort of rollout should be, bread and butter to the organization, really, with other things that have got to go on. Um, and I think in terms of a user experience of actually using it, um, from my perspective, with the with correct configuration, um, MFA can be and we will talk about a little bit more of effective configuration of it. MFA can be, you know, unobtrusive, you know, and it can, we can, but I suppose it's all tied to your session life cycle anyway, isn't it? Right. So, if you're getting MFA'd constantly, you could also be getting password prompted constantly as well, right? So there's also multiple things that are potentially going on there. But what we're talking about is somebody logs in, fresh session, and they get prompted, to first provide their password, and then they will need some other device in order to complete that login. So yeah.
I mean, if you're kind of talking about the experience of the users, if you've got a corporate device with Windows Hello set up, because it's using the TPM, it in effect's got a certificate to show, prove it's you. With you signing into that device using Windows Hello, be it biometrics or the PIN, um, that kind of acts as your two-factor onto the device. So then, when you're in sessions, when you go into office and things like that, and say you're not in the corporate location, you're at a coffee shop and things like that, and you go to sign in, if you didn't have Windows Hello, then you'd be prompted. But because Windows Hello is in the background, you've already in effect authenticated. When you go to the browser and you go to you put your password in if you're not using passwordless at that point, or single sign in. Um, it will go back to the device, say, right, I need two-factor, and you go, oh, you've got Windows Hello, you've signed in as it, so you're like authenticated at that point. Can I have like the token to prove that it's you? Yes, there you go. So that in fact, that prompt is then hidden, automatically done for you because it knows that you've signed in because it's a trusted device, something you own, something you have, and then you've typed in a pin in to log in that's not your password, so it's something you know.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're also saying is that like Windows Hello can even reduce the number of MFA prompts as you go through. So yeah, so once you layer on these different types of technologies, they can all work together to provide a better user experience.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen that, haven't you, with us when you had your TPM went a bit funny, didn't it?
Yeah,
With
exactly. Yeah, it's
you had a
horrible. It's
firmware
horrible.
update,
No,
didn't
no,
you?
don't know.
You
Yeah,
had prompts all the time.
don't lose TPM. Yeah, it's yeah, yeah. That's a great shout out, to be totally honest with you. That just reminded me. I should have actually brought that up as an example. But okay, yeah, no, that's great. And I think just talking about user experience for user as well. So for instance, using the Authenticator app, they can get a push notification with a prompt inside of it, which can be um, super simple in terms of instead of having to ride like a passcode or some sort of pin, they can just press accept, yes, that's me, and that system is really effective as well.
Yeah, I think in February they're bringing in, at the end of February or beginning of February, I can't remember. They're bringing in that everyone's gonna have to put in the number bit to prove that you're not just pressing it to
Right,
get past it and accidentally letting someone in.
but
So you
that's
have
the
to
that's
be
the
able to see
number
it.
challenge that is provided to you, right? So you get given a number and you put it in on the app. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So but not, you don't put it in on the browser, right? The browser gives it to you, that login.
tells you it, yes,
Yeah,
and
and then
you've
you've
got
got
to
to
type it
provide
in
it in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
to prove you're in front of the actual screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay. So how is your user data stored and used? If you're using a personal device, and you're using your personal number, or you would probably won't use your email address, but your personal phone number to do your MFA. How is that stored or used?
Yeah, so this is where and I don't want to dwell on this point too much, but I think it's worth having in the back of, people's minds, especially if you are in a very privacy focused territory, I think is probably worth shouting out about. Um, and Microsoft have some really good documentation in terms of how to show what data is being captured. Because and this does sort of tie into, and you could probably do a whole episode on, the like the sign in process. It might be a bit boring, but like the sign in process and what logs are produced and things like that, because it does overlap a little bit here. Um, but the reason why I put this in here is because you could be providing um, more sensitive personal information about your employees, for instance, um, inside of into Azure AD, right? You could be taking because you might capture somebody's personal mobile phone number, or maybe a relative's, a personal mobile number as maybe an emergency contact in terms of HR for your business. But now we're talking about potentially storing app identifiers, device identifiers, uh, uh, IP addresses. I mean, that's login anyway, but IP addresses and other parts of personal information, people's phone numbers. I suppose you could theoretically do your personal email address, couldn't you? I mean, you would. Yeah, you could do,
For
but
self-service password reset,
you
you would,
would,
yeah.
yeah. So so there's many different things that could go in there. So so Microsoft have some really good documentation. I'm not going to go through it all now, but I think it's worth just understanding that those questions could be asked in terms of your head of yeah, somebody might come to you and ask you about how that data is stored and how long it's stored for, and things like that. So
And who has access,
who
yeah.
has access to it, who can see it, and what's the governance around access to that information. um because traditionally that data might be stored in a HR system only available to core HR employees that require that information. But now theoretically those phone numbers, you can see them in Azure AD, right? And you can see what's multi-factor, other multi-factor mechanisms are being used. So it's just something to bear in mind that you are you are going to be potentially capturing, but that is also only in the scenario of if they're using their personal devices, right? If you don't, if you've got corporate devices that you gift out, not gift out to, that everybody uses, and or you've got a FIDO2 key instead, then you could negate some of those potential challenges and headaches. So that even though the Microsoft Authenticator app and SMS and phone call seem like really easy to adopt from a business perspective, like they could be free and or easy, users' privacy and their data is something that really needs to be thought about. Maybe not when you're small. Well, you should anyway when you're small, but maybe that's you know um, overlooked when you're a smaller organization. But when you get to a large scale organization, that's when those types of questions and conversations may need to be had.
Yeah, I think the authenticator app, I don't think we get too much information into Azure AD. Um, it's more probably the sign-in information that you're talking about, which would be captured anyway, about what IP address you've come from to prove, um,
Yeah, exactly.
to challenge where you're coming from and things like that.
Yeah, so it is,
Um,
all the documentation is mixed in with sign-in logs, and what extra information that is actually going into those, sign-in, that sign-in information.
okay, so going on to the next question: how is MFA used in conjunction with conditional access and identity protection?
Okay, so conditional access can be used to require um, multi-factor authentication for certain types of logins and scenarios. I won't go into them in depth, but I've got a few key conditional access policies that could be deployed. So we've got things like require MFA for guest users, for instance. Why require MFA for administrators? Maybe to start off with, you want to try out MFA for your administrators, because that's probably a good idea, I would think, to have MFA on your admin accounts. But maybe you want to pilot it with administrators. I mean, you could pilot it in different ways, but basic sort of out of the box configurations. Requiring multi-factor authentication for in-tune device enrollments. So as somebody's enrolling onto a new device, that's quite a key life cycle in the provisioning of that device. You may require it um, every single time. Maybe even if you are on site in the office and things like that, you might still want that in place. Um, and then, so a great one is to require MFA for locations that are not considered safe. So, what? Let's say you're a business that only has employees in the UK. Just to make it really, really simple. If you see sign-in activity and attempts, in different countries, um, you could be tempted to completely block sign-in from those countries, because you could say, you know, um, oh, my users never go to Wales. No, that's just stupid because that's part of the UK. I was thinking England. I do know the difference between the UK and England, Wales, and Scotland. Nobody should be accessing logging in from France. Nothing wrong with France. Just the closest, whatever, another country. And you could say, right, I don't want anybody to log in from France. But then it might be that some of your employees are going out to a customer site in France, and then they can't log in at all, and then you've got to make a hasty change. So what you could say is, okay, well, for certain locations, or maybe all locations, allow people to sign in, but challenge them with an MFA prompt. And this is, the name sort of says it on the tin. This is where conditional access, really does excel. Being able to create these. I'm not going to say complex. It's not complex, but to be able to model these more complex interactions inside of your business, and to provide a better user experience when they happen, right? Because these types of policies that are put in aren't a complete catch-all, are they? That they can just be, for all organizations. It's just they're all going to work. They are going to be custom for each organization.
is is it worth actually mentioning what conditional access is? Because we've kind of talked about how we sort of do MFA in different sort of scenarios. We've not really talked about briefly sort of what conditional access is.
Would you like to give us a bit quick primer on conditional
Yeah.
access? I mean, it could be
Eh,
its own episode, so you
well,
don't know.
yeah, it could, but conditional access is in effect when you sign into an application that is Office 365, anything like that, or any SaaS application integrated. It's like the is in effect the gate. It makes you put in their decisions about what you can access from where, kind of thing, and it includes signals like the device compliance, what device you're on, who the user is, where they're coming from, and things like that, as sort of Sam mentioned. So it's kind of choosing. You're able to sort of dynamically, not necessarily dynamically, but you can customize where and when people can sign in and what sort of prompts they get. So, eh, sort of talking outside of MFA, you could say that the HR system that is integrated with Azure AD can only be accessed from a managed device. They can't access from a personal device, and they can only access it when it's in the office IP. Kind of what you were saying, Sam, about location. We're saying HR can only be accessed when you're on the corporate network.
Yeah,
But off Outlook can be accessed when you're roaming on your phone,
yeah.
things like that.
No, so conditional access sort of works hand in hand with MFA, right? To help you to augment those experiences, and to put some sensible best practice in terms of the risk appetite of your business, right? Because you can blur these lines of absolute dominance of, like, no, we don't want anything, to, okay, well, that seems like, it could be a risky activity. I'm going to, prompt for MFA at that time. And that brings me on nicely. Great segue to risky
Mhm.
sign-in attempts. So one great paired with identity protection. Um, identity, uh, I think the best way to describe it is identity protection driving the signals for conditional access. Is that the right way of saying it, Alan? That
Yeah, the risky sign-ins and risky user bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so identity protection is there giving you your risky sign-ins and sign-in attempts and your risky users. Then you can say things like, if I feel if identity protection is kicked in, and this is we'll talk about licensing in a minute, but you have to be licensed for it. Um, if identity protection kicks in and says, hey, Alan's sign-in attempt from somewhere looks risky, then you could say at that time, challenge Alan for an MFA, just to make sure it definitely is Alan, because sometimes we get false positives through that system, because you might not want to completely block all sign-in attempts from risky users because there could be false positives in there. So you know so check those risky sign-ins. Have that system working there, detecting them, but then also augment that with MFA afterwards.
Yeah, so just probably adding on to that is that the signing signals we get is that a user is at low, medium, or high risk. So or none, of course, at that point. But it might be like you said, Sam, that when a user is at a medium risk, you may ask for more MFA prompts. You know, we might have a device that's managed um, in the right location, maybe, but you might want to still want to check MFA because if that device is potentially compromised, even on like the corporate network, I mean, you should have technologies protecting that, but it's potential, it's always there. Um, then you can force a prompt there. The other thing is that there's two signals. There's risky sign-in. So as you said, Sam, as they're signing in, if they're coming from a risky IP or they're doing impossible travel, you know, etc., um, then it becomes in. But you've got user sign-in, user risk, and that's normally based on the user's credentials. So if you've got password hash sync set up, then when there's been a breach in another product out there, and Microsoft's able to grab username and passwords, they hash them and then they try to match them against your corporate accounts, so that if it sees there's a match, then it knows that it's out on the dark web, it's been compromised, and it gives them a risky a high risk user. And with conditional access, you can say, well, if I see a high risk user, then I'll force them to change their password.
Yeah,
And you can say that they can only change their password on premise.
yeah,
You can do that. Obviously, there could be some friction if your workforce is hybrid, remote. Um, but when they change their password, then their risk level gets reset because Microsoft knows that they've reset their
yeah,
password.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah,
So those more. So I think it's the big sort of the reason why I wanted to talk about those two things is that if you are struggling with MFA and the number of prompts and how it prompts and it getting in the way and different things, there are ways to tune that so it is more um, it is a better user experience, but tuning it not from the user's side but actually from the organization's side. So I think it was definitely worth talking about those more advanced topics.
yeah, definitely. Okay, the question that everyone loves, as we always go: how is it licensed? How much have we got? How much does it cost? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay, so is it right to say it's technically available for everyone? I think that's probably kind of the correct way. Nah, I can't. I'll walk through it. So
Yeah.
there is a free element which is enabled by security defaults. Um, but that will effectively, if you enable security defaults, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, it will just challenge MFA for everybody all the time. Is that? correct to say?
For every new session,
For
yeah, it doesn't
every new
matter where
session.
you are
Yeah, exactly. So
because it doesn't include conditional access.
yes, yeah. So and for normal users in free mode, you can only use the mobile app as a second factor as well. So that's also restricting down in terms of how you interact with the product and how you can and these more advanced checks and things like that. You don't have access to that. What is kind of nice though is that for um, for global administrators in free mode, they also allow you to use a phone call, SMS, um, and allows admin control over those verification methods as well. So that's really so you are getting, and I assume that's for break glass, right, Alan? Being able to definitely get back into those admin accounts as well, right? With those phone calls and
Ye-
SMS
Yeah,
backups.
because you don't have conditional access, you can't really exclude MFA. So yeah, it's adding extra factors so that you can still get back in.
Yeah. And then there's a base Office 365, which is the same. So base Office 365 is going to be in what the lower, not like business premium tiers, right? It'll be in the I can't
It'll be if you've got Office 365.
just Office
It's just
365. Yeah,
generally
exactly.
yeah.
In general Office 365, they have the same coverage as global administrators. So SMS, they can pick, that their factors. And then you have Azure AD Premium P1 and P2, and how they're licensed in your organization can be in many different ways, right? Like how you can and what levels you have. But P1 is going to give you um, so things like MFA reports, custom greetings for phone calls. Um, it's going to give you MFA for on-prem applications as well, and it's going to give you conditional access, base conditional access as well on top of that. And you can, for all your users, you can set different second factors and things like that. But then what P2 is going to give you, if that's what you know, if that's what you've got, then you're also going to get risk-based conditional access and identity protection. Um, so effectively, everything that we've talked about to get this more advanced MFA set up, you're going to need to be on P2. Um, but I think it's fair to say, Alan, that um, anything's better than nothing when it comes to MFA. And
Yep.
a policy of everybody having MFA for every new session isn't necessarily a bad user experience either, is it? I wouldn't say it's going to be pretty. It is going to be pretty noisy, but that's not really the end of the world, is it? In terms of because the way that I sort of see it is MFA is so powerful, it's so important and effective that living with those restrictions is still going to be worth the trade-off, right?
Yeah, I think it'll just be a prompt in the morning, and maybe if that, like I said, it's new sessions, so it depends how often that session sort of expires on the device. If someone's working all day, their desktop stays on. They'll probably they probably won't get many prompts. Maybe a laptop user might get a few more because of maybe because of the machine going to sleep or the sessions maybe expiring because they're changing networks, things like that. That might be the only difference with it, but
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think it'll be any worse than any other systems, SaaS systems out there that you may have MFA. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well that's what that default security default mode is going to be what people expect from all different types of systems, right? That's what you see everywhere, don't you? Right?
yeah,
You don't have any, cached, session tokens with your personal banking applications, do you? It's challenge every single time, right? So yeah. So yeah, that's a quick whistle stop tour of MFA. Alan, anything else you would like to add? Anything you think I've missed, or keep me honest and correct me?
No, I don't think so. I think we've done well in the time, and we're
I
56
know it's
well, some time, aren't we? So 50 minutes or something like that. So
yeah. So if you made 56 minutes through 56 minutes of MFA, kudos to you for sure. I mean, it's exciting to us because it's a core part of our security strategy, right? So it's something that we, especially Alan, is living and breathing every day. So yeah, it's easy for us to talk about some of the more important parts of it. Okay, Alan. Next episode, what are we planning on talking about?
next episode is going to be Azure Virtual Desktop,
Amazing.
and I probably put in a little bit around Windows 365 because it's very similar. Um, Similar in different ways, but in effect, the technology's the same. Just how you manage it is different. So I think it's worth putting a little bit in there. I think we could talk about Windows 365 probably the same amount of time. So
Yeah.
let's hope we don't go too mad on it. But let's see.
No,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we've been deploying it recently, haven't we? Um, and seeing all the cool things you can do with it. So um, yeah, it's just worth showing. And just briefly, Azure Virtual Desktop is a remote desktop session sort of or VDI solution that Microsoft have brought out the last couple of years. So we'll run through that, I think.
Yeah, and we've got some good knowledge of tuning it for, saving a few pennies as well, haven't we? So I think it's don't tell Microsoft that part. But yeah, it is possible to have it as a really cost effective VDI solution and flexible VDI solution as well, right? So yeah, it's very powerful. It's a great bit kit. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many more topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
We also have the ability for you to give us some feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Is there any other questions you want to ask us? Feel free to send us some feedback. There'll be a link in the show notes that takes you to a form. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Alan, for your time, and thanks to everyone for listening. I think our first episode, getting back to it, wasn't too bad. So yeah, we'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Take care. Speak soon. Bye.